Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the focus on an aspect of Labour's Employment Rights Bill which will help unions access workplaces where they have little to no presence at the moment. Particularly like to focus in on the aspects of this strengthening of unions, which will be one of the reasons Nigel Farage voted against the legislation despite claiming to back workers. Because in reality he profits when workers do badly. It is the sole purpose of unions to get a better deal for workers, and it is the sole purpose for Nigel Farage to get them a worse deal. But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So interesting to be reading an article on moves to strengthen unions in the Tory media. It was in the Times, where it wasn't explicitly attacking the moves. It's actually quite neutral. So anyone who's anti-union would probably read it as, oh, this is disgraceful. And anyone pro-union would read it as, oh, this is brilliant. It refers to part of the Employment Rights Bill currently going through the House of Lords. It's at the committee stage. So, I'm hoping maybe it could get passed before the summer recess. The article in the Times talks about unions being able to use their employers' Zoom facilities to run meetings and allow unions to send messages via their own internal systems, email systems, and so on. Excellent idea. Not only does it help unions function in perhaps some of the smaller workplaces much more efficiently at no cost to the employer themselves, but it encourages cooperation between unions and employers. That can only be a good thing. It's the same concept as with Brexit. After we left the EU and then made the EU adversaries, it meant that UK and EU officials were no longer really talking to one another. And as a lot of people with experience in the EU had said, this led to a lot of misunderstandings on both sides, which in turn led to more aggro. Well, aggro in the workplace is bad for both workers and bosses. The more you talk, the more you're going to understand where the other side is coming from, the more you come up with solutions which work for both sides. And sharing resources like this encourages those discussions. But there was one little factoid in the article which really highlights for me why Nigel Farage, the so-called people's champion, has been voting against these measures. And that's because he is actually the enemy of the real people's champions, unions. The article highlighted that although union membership in the public sector has increased in recent years, thanks no doubt to the way the Tories were crushing those workers, but that numbers had fallen in the private sector. This will also be because the Tories have legislated to make it much more difficult for unions to represent workers in private sectors. Something that is being rolled back with the interest now. But it also reported that 64% of union members are graduates. Now, one of the main thrusts of the article is how the legislation is designed to boost union membership. Although some will say, well, this is an unfair characteristic. I'm not about quibbling over semantics. If you help unions become more effective at representing workers, then more workers will see the value in joining a union and more people will join unions. So it doesn't matter whether it's by explicit design or not. The legislation will obviously make it more likely union membership will go up. But, and this is where Farage will fear that trajectory, we need it to go up for non-graduate workers. If 64% of union members are graduate, that is disproportionate. That's almost double the rate of workers who are graduates. So that means disproportionately a lot of non-graduate workers are not members of unions. So that's a particular problem. Basically, the sort of person Farage most appeals to, whom we know, for example, tends to be uneducated workers, is also the sort of person that seems these days to be less likely to be in a union. And of course, if you're not in a union, and this is much more the case if an entire workforce, like all your colleagues aren't in a union either, then those workers will not get good deals on pay conditions or pensions. For example, I was a teacher for 2 decades. The teacher's pension scheme is a pretty good deal. I'm going to end up, I've only paid into it for about 10 years. I'm going to get better pension, works pension, than my wife, who's been paying into it all her life. And that's because with the teacher's pension scheme, the employer pays quite a bit into it themselves. So it's not just your contributions, right? And why is that? Because almost 100% of teachers are in a union. Like almost every teacher is in a union. Now, yes, sure, sometimes unions make bad decisions like anyone else, and the media will be very swift to call them out when it happens. They don't report so much the victories for workers. It's like a few years ago. Actually, in the private sector, unions were getting pay deal after pay deal after pay deal for inflation-busting pay rises. It's why pay in the private sector has actually gone up significantly over the last few years, despite what the Tories were doing. But they were squeezing it for public sector workers because they had direct control over that. So the media was happy to report about all the strikes, not so happy to report about all the successes that unions were having. And this gives a skewed view of unions. But they work, and they exist to fight for workers' rights, workers' pay and workers' conditions. That's it. Yes, you sometimes get the odd failed politician who joins and tries to use them for their own personal soapbox, but it's not that widespread. Most are just negotiating with employers to get good terms for their members and lobbying the government to bring in statutory rights. It's unions we have to thank for the weekend, holiday pay, sick pay, safety in the workplace. There was a time where you went to work, got killed because health and safety wasn't a thing, then you're just tossed out and a new person hired to take your place. When people complain about health and safety, it's not really the workers who want to go home to their families at the end of the day doing the belly aching, is it? And all this is down to unions. So imagine what would happen if union membership increased. Imagine what would happen if more non-graduate workers joined a union and those unions could do their jobs more efficiently in representing them. That would lead to better pay, better conditions, an all-round happier work-life balance. That's the benefit of unions. If I had to put it in one simple term, a happier work-life balance. Poison to Farage. He feeds on the disenfranchised, those who feel they're being neglected. And yes, retired people are a big part of his support, sure, but he preys on workers. As I was discussing earlier in a different context, Farage isn't about solutions, he's about blame, and false blame at that. He tells workers they're being shafted by other workers. He's like a badger baiter, making enemies of animals who need to cause one another no harm at all for his own profit and enjoyment. The reason workers are struggling is because they're being taken advantage of, yes, but not by the other struggling people Farage blames, and certainly not by the people trying to help them. Farage frequently attacks unions. The last thing he wants to see is unions becoming empowered to tackle some of the real causes of workers' problems and Labour dealing with some of the rest. That would be disastrous for them. He needs people to be screwed over. All he is the finger of blame. There are no other strings to his bow. Give people empowerment in the workplace, they no longer feel the need to worship the blame monster. Where will Farage get his money from then? Simply cannot be pointed out enough. Nigel Farage and his entire Reform UK party is hostile to the Employment Rights Bill. They'd scrap it. They tried to scrap it. They voted against it. This is the biggest boost to workers' rights in my lifetime. He voted against it. He attacks it at every opportunity. Of all the many ways he demonstrates that he is not on the side of struggling workers, if people would only carefully consider what he's doing and saying, this is the one which proves it beyond doubt. He wants to stop you getting organised. That's what unions do. They organise people into a force that can stand up for themselves. Farage wants to destroy that. He wants workers to trust that he will act on their behalf. While he laughs and jokes with the wealthy elite making a fortune by squeezing your life for everything it's worth with minimal payment for your labours. This legislation cannot come soon enough. I just wish Labour would put as much effort into communicating their efforts for workers as they are in actually empowering them, because politically speaking, it's going to be way less effective to improve people's lives if they don't realise you're the one doing it. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.